Today on Newsgirls, Trump's shocking deals, cartels in Qatar.
The trip concluded in a $3 billion weapons sale to Qatar and the UAE.
Considering a reality TV show where immigrants will compete for American citizenship. A $4 billion pig butchering scam, gangs and criminals, some with ties to North Korea,
And conduct their schemes in high rises overlooking the water.
I know LinkedIn tries to stop them, but there's only so much you can do in some of these cases.
and summer travel tips.
There's a lot of AI travel hacks that can actually plan your entire trip for you.
What is going on with all of these air traffic control communication outages?
Airlines are struggling to operate the flights that they have already sold.
Welcome to Newsgirls.
I'm Wren.
And I'm Mabel.
Let's get into the stories.
There's been so much chaos in DC this past week, from Trump accepting the $400 million plane to the white South Africans that came to the US as refugees to the US losing its AAA credit rating. So of course that means we have to get into another installment of Trumpdates.
And we know you've all been waiting for the official Newsgirls reaction to Trump's post about Taylor Swift, so we will be getting into that.
Everyone's been following Trump's whirlwind trip to the Middle East, where he met with all of these leaders and was actually praised across the aisle for having a really successful meeting with the new president of Syria. But the trip concluded in a $3 billion weapons sale to Qatar and the UAE, which of course has caused a lot of controversy.
The sale would include Chinook helicopters, armed drones, hundreds of bombs, targeting kits, and F-16 aircraft components. And the State Department approved the sales, and the administration actually bypassed an informal review process for the sale to the Emirates.
And of course, the Dems are not happy with this. So Senator Chris Murphy is leading the opposition against the sale and is actually trying to block it, saying how problematic it is that the sale is coming as Trump's family has so many ongoing business deals with these governments.
Right. Trump is building a $5.5 billion beachside villa and golf course in Qatar. And just a couple weeks ago, an Emirati firm invested $2 billion into one of his crypto ventures.
And we've reported on the golf course and the villa and how when Trump's family made those deals, they weren't problematic in isolation. But down the road, aka now, these conflicts of interest are arising because Trump is the president and these are really powerful governments. So we're potentially giving a country that he has business relations with billions of dollars of taxpayer money for weapons.
So we were wondering, how can the Dems block this bill because they're the minority party? But apparently the Arms Export Control Act gives them what's called a procedural tool to force a debate and vote on the floor.
And on top of that, lawmakers have criticized the Emirates specifically for its role in the war in Sudan that's going on right now. So they've been accused by the US and UN of supporting a Sudanese paramilitary group that is committing genocide in Sudan. An attack just last month killed 300 people and actually caused hundreds of thousands to flee. Quote, the US should not be delivering weapons as it aids and abets this humanitarian disaster and gross human rights violations.
So obviously we have to get into how Trump has picked a fight with some of the most famous celebrities in the world, like Beyoncé, Oprah, Taylor Swift, Bruce Springsteen, and Bono.
Yeah, he's been busy with a lot of late night random truth socialing these days.
So he said, how much did Kamala Harris pay Bruce Springsteen for his poor performance during her campaign for president? Why did he accept that money if he's such a fan of hers? Isn't that a major and illegal campaign contribution? What about Beyonce? How much went to Oprah and Bono? I'm going to call for a major investigation into this matter.
So there is no evidence that Harris paid Beyonce or any of these artists. There are records, of course, that her campaign paid Beyonce, Oprah, and Springsteen's production companies for managing their appearances, but the celebrities never got a personal fee.
And Trump had previously posted kind of a threatening message to Bruce Springsteen after he said this at his concert in Manchester.
In my home, the America I love, currently in the hands of a corrupt, incompetent, and treasonous administration. There's some very weird, strange, and dangerous shit going on out there right now. In America, the richest men are taking satisfaction in abandoning the world's poorest children to sickness and death.
I see that highly overrated Bruce Springsteen goes to a foreign country to speak badly about the President of the United States, which is himself. Never liked him, never liked his music or his radical left politics, and importantly, he is not a talented guy, just a pushy, obnoxious jerk who fervently supported crooked Joe Biden and mentally incompetent fool, our worst ever president, who came close to destroying our country. This dried out prune of a rocker, his skin is all atrophied, ought to keep his mouth shut until he gets back to the country. That's just standard fare, and we'll see how it all goes for him.
Then we'll all see how it goes for him. Like, what does that literally mean? What is he gonna do to Bruce Springsteen when he comes back to the country?
I don't know. I know Bruce is on a sold out tour in Europe, so he's not returning to the US until July. So we'll have to be on like Bruce watch when he gets back.
Oh, great. And of course, as Ren teased at the top of the segment, we have to get into Trump's Truth Social on Taylor Swift. Quote, has anyone noticed that since I said I hate Taylor Swift, she's no longer hot?
So he's referring to his very eloquently worded post after she endorsed Harris in the last election. But Trump should get his facts straight because Taylor Swift is so hot.
ICE agents raided over 100 DC restaurants and businesses last week, requesting to see the employment verification forms of all of the workers in these restaurants. And according to witnesses, many of the agents were armed with weapons, even though they weren't targeting criminals.
That must have been so jarring for literally everyone there, whether you're just working at your serving job or even if you're just eating in the restaurant and suddenly armed ICE agents are just swarming in.
Yeah, and we looked into this specific branch of ICE that's called Homeland Security Investigations, and we found out that they only investigate crime. So like human trafficking, like bringing in drugs, things of that sort. So just sending in these guys to check the legal papers of migrants that make up so much of the restaurant workforce is just really unexpected.
Well, people think it's connected to Trump's executive order titled Making DC Safe and Beautiful, even though I don't know how these raids are making DC safe or beautiful since they weren't targeting criminals and they didn't even make any arrests.
And maybe that's partially because a group of activists somehow kind of found out that these raids were happening and warned delivery drivers and restaurants of this ahead of time so that they were ready. And it's interesting because when Trump became president, we actually reported on these advocacy groups preparing for raids. And it seemed like such a far off hypothetical situation at the time. But it seems like all of that preparing in January actually is what helped make them all ready now.
Well, speaking of crazy hypotheticals that we never expected to become real, the Department of Homeland Security is considering a reality TV show where immigrants will compete for American citizenship. So it would be called The American, and they say contestants will represent a wide demographic of ages, ethnicities, and talents, and will join in the laughter, tears, frustration, and joy as we're reminded of how amazing it is to be American.
And it just gets weirder and more disturbing. So apparently each episode would include a heritage challenge, an elimination challenge, a town hall meeting, and a final vote, according to the show's like deck that we're seeing here. The producer said that the heritage challenge will be tailored to specific locations. So this is insane. So there would be a gold rush challenge in San Francisco, a pizza challenge in New York, and a NASA challenge in Florida to showcase how cool America is.
And it's the same producer as The Millionaire Matchmaker, Duck Dynasty, The Biggest Loser. So he is a big deal in the reality show world. And he said that he has pitched this to every administration since Obama, but it's never gone this far in the process.
We love reality TV shows as much as the next person. This one definitely crosses the line. Trump ripped into Walmart over the weekend, telling it to eat the cost of all of these rising tariffs. And even though everyone's been really relieved to hear that tariffs on China were brought down to 30%, it's important to remember that the different taxes all stack on top of each other, bringing the rate up to 70%.
Yeah, we didn't realize that you can have layers of tariffs. So like shoes, for example, there's a 40% leather tariff. There's a 20% tariff on countries that bring in fentanyl, like China, and a 10% reciprocal tariff. So that's 70% right there.
Yeah, and these tariffs affect even the most basic items, some of which hit higher than that 40% tax on leather. So cotton sweaters, for example, there's a 46.5% tariff on them. Women's bathing suits, 54.9%. Even babies' dresses face a 41.5% tax.
I mean, that's a lot. And that's why it shocked consumers and business owners when Trump posted, Walmart should stop trying to blame tariffs as a reason for raising prices throughout the chain. Walmart made billions of dollars last year, far more than expected. Between Walmart and China, they should, as is said, eat the tariffs and not charge valued customers anything. I'll be watching, and so will your customers.
Ren, this entire segment is just reading like such long Truth Social posts. That's your job.
I have an alter ego now.
And Walmart is obviously one of the businesses that might be able to actually handle all of these tariffs because they're this like mega company. But what about smaller companies? The tariffs are skyrocketing in a way that's just not sustainable for smaller businesses.
Yeah, the Walmart CFO said, we're trying to navigate this the best we can, but this is a little bit unprecedented in terms of the speed and magnitude in which the price increases are coming. Trump made a deal with notorious cartel leader El Chapo's family to welcome 17 of his family members to the United States.
There's literally video of the family members walking across the border from Tijuana with their suitcases to waiting US agents, and reportedly they packed $70,000 in cash with them.
That doesn't sound sketchy at all. El Chapo's ex-wife was among them, and she's been arrested for her role in his Sinaloa cartel, which at its peak was one of the most powerful drug trafficking groups in the world.
And apparently the president of Mexico told reporters that she was surprised by the news, and the Mexican government has demanded that Trump share information about the deal, which he still hasn't done yet. And I would also like details about why this is happening or how this happened, since this same administration is raiding businesses and spending billions of dollars deporting immigrants. So why are relatives of the most famous Mexican criminal being welcomed here with open arms? And to round out our Trump dates, a $45 million military parade with tanks and warplanes will be gracing the streets of DC on Trump's birthday next month. So I guess he's a Gemini, which makes sense.
Well, I guess the army is too, because it's also being billed as its 250th anniversary. And the parade will include an astounding 150 vehicles, 50 warplanes, and more than 6,000 soldiers.
Apparently, it's supposed to celebrate every U.S. conflict dating back to the Revolutionary War, and thousands of soldiers are visiting D.C. to participate and dress up in period costumes. And I guess these M1 Abrams tanks rolling down Constitution Avenue are supposed to be the highlight of the parade, so I'm glad that all these billion-dollar weapons are finally being put to good use.
The tanks weigh 60 tons each, so the army is putting down 100-pound metal plates on the street so that they don't cause any damage, because cleanup isn't even included in that $45 million taxpayer-funded price tag. And following the parade will be a parachute jump by the Army's Golden Knights. And here I thought my birthday table at a club was excessive.
And for some updates that you might have missed, Trump signed the Take It Down Act, which is a bill that addresses revenge porn and non-consensual deepfake images.
Which was actually championed by First Lady Melania Trump. Oh, last night I got another pig butchering text.
What'd they say this time?
It says, "Would you like to come over to my place tomorrow?" From unknown number.
These are just so common now. I feel like we get like 10 a day.
They just seem so friendly. Like, it doesn't seem insidious, but we know it is.
Well, that's a perfect way to get into our piece today, because the U.S. Treasury is actually imposing sanctions on a Cambodian financial firm called Wren Group for allowing international criminal gangs to run romance scams and cyber crimes through their online marketplace to target Americans.
The Treasury just released a report that found that in the last 4 years, gangs and criminals, some with ties to North Korea, have stolen billions and billions of dollars from everyday Americans. So just the proceeds that Wren made for facilitating these transactions was $4 billion. So that's like commission, which is 10% at most. So the gangs made like 40 billion.
I mean, that's just insane. And I feel like we've been warned about these like scammers for a while now. I just thought that they were small, shady, kind of back alley organizations that were ripping people off. But what was really interesting to us about this story is that Wren Group is not that. It's this huge, high-profile international company.
Yeah, exactly. That's what makes this way scarier, because it is a legit corporation. Like, the cousin of Cambodia's prime minister is a director of one of the Wren subsidiaries. And they have satellite companies all over the world, but they are best known in Cambodia because they make those QR codes that are on, like, all the restaurants and, like, hotels' bills.
So this company, which has actually been referred to as the world's largest illicit internet market, has ads plastered all over the highways in Phnom Penh, and apparently they're operating out in the open. So according to reporting, they're all super loaded and conduct their schemes in high rises overlooking the water and in fancy restaurants where people can just hear them because they're not scared of getting caught. Apparently every few weeks fireworks light up the sky in Cambodia, and it's just common knowledge to everyone that lives there that it's by these scammers celebrating their victories.
A way to be subtle about it. And obviously the scam that these criminals are running is called pig butchering.
And before this story, I had no idea it was called that. I thought that meant killing pigs.
Well, it's like they fatten you up before they butcher you and take all your money.
It's lovely imagery. And apparently it comes from a Chinese phrase that literally means fattening the pig before slaughter. And interestingly, major cybersecurity groups and even Interpol are trying to end the use of the term. So since they think it shames victims of fraud, there's a really big movement to change the name to romance baiting or romance scamming.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that because pig butchering is such evocative imagery and we already all call it that. So like the branding's done. So maybe just take the resources you're trying to put into changing the name and put it into fighting the scams.
So the title for our story will remain Pig Butchering then.
Yes. So today we're speaking to Jeff Kroom, who's a distinguished engineer at IBM and has a PhD in cybersecurity. He also posts YouTube videos on cybersecurity that have more than 10 million views. He wants us to emphasize that all the views expressed in the interview are his own.
We know that there's a lot of different ways that scammers target people. We know that there's like the romance way, there's friendship, there's jobs. Can you walk us through each of these different schemes?
Sure. It's really interesting. There are a lot of different entry points is the way I look at it, but in general, they all tend to lead to the same place. And the same place is your money on fire. So a typical romance scam, and these happen a lot from dating apps. All of a sudden you start getting attention from someone that is way out of your league. And you're like, oh, well, this is too great. I'm going to do whatever I can to keep this person's interest. Another is what's referred to as pig butchering. I got this message just a couple of days ago from a number I don't recognize. I'm having a little get together at my place tomorrow, and I'd love for you to come over for some hot dogs, because who doesn't love hot dogs? And the idea is that I would respond to that. Even if I just respond and say, I think you've got the wrong number, they're going to continue to try to keep the ball in play. Another one that's very similar to that are job recruitment scams. Here's a great job. You make $1,000 an hour, work, from your home, all these things that are too good to be true.
And with those, are we seeing any demographic or age, gender target, or really it's anyone and everyone?
The people doing these attacks are happy to get anybody's money. The romance scams, many of these take advantage disproportionately of people who are older because they're maybe not as familiar with the technology. And they tend to believe what they've seen.
After these scammers have fattened up their targets, how do they convince them to send them money? How do you get to that point? Because it seems so out of the realm of reality.
This is one of those things where if a stranger sent you a message and said, send me $10,000, you're going to say, get lost.
Right.
But what happens is they slowly turn up the heat, and all of a sudden you don't realize that in fact you're boiling. But they'll say all kinds of complimentary things. You say the most wonderful things, you're the love of my life. And it's not like only suckers are falling for this. Everybody's got some blind spots. The pure romance scams will tend to go down a path of, they're really interested in seeing you. They really want, this to meet, all this kind of stuff. And then they just maybe need a plane ticket. This is, you want to meet them because you're starting to feel a connection. So, and you send the money, and maybe they just take the money and run. Maybe they take the money and make an excuse for why they need yet more money. Maybe they just got laid off from their job. So here's the sob story version. I just got mugged. Somebody stole my money. My mother is sick and in the hospital, and I don't know what I'm going to do if I can't, pay the bills for her. In the other cases, it's more of a friendship. And in those cases, it leads to fake investment scams. People want to invest in crypto. Hey, I just made $10,000 in the last hour, and my uncle showed me how to do this crypto investing. And I asked him, and because you and I are friends, he doesn't mind if I share with you the same way to do it. And they show you pictures of boats and cars and all these kinds of things that they bought with all this money. They show you a great return on your investment. You just doubled your money in a day. So lay down more. You can double your money in another day. And you keep doing more and more. Here's the thing. There was never an investment. Once you ask for your money back, then they disappear.
So what do you think makes a good scammer? Because I feel like a part of it is you have to be really good at reading people. Because at what point in the operation do you push? When do you kind of hold back?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. The really good scammers are ones who do have a sense of how to read people and how to find out what your weak point is. Are you really interested in romance or not? Are you just interested in friendship? Are you greedy? I'm going to find out where's your weak point, maybe all of them, and try to exploit all at the same time.
And so walk us through, I'm very interested in the job scam side of things, because if you're looking for job listings, how do you know what is real, what to trust?
This is, I think, one of the more difficult ones. The romance scam Again, I can usually spot those pretty quickly. Recruitment scams are harder. Now, if you get a text message out of the clear blue, I wasn't looking for a job, so I know that's a scam. And then when I read it, it becomes obvious that it is. However, people who actually are looking for jobs, they could end up putting themselves on subscription lists, and they might legitimately get real queries. Real opportunities come through that way. So now it's a lot harder. If you're on LinkedIn, I know LinkedIn tries to stop them, but there's only so much you can do in some of these cases. What do you do on a job application? Well, you got name, rank, and serial number. Where do you live? All these where have you worked in the past? Where have you lived in the past? We need to do a background check. And an employer, they do need to know your social security number because the law requires it.
Obviously, these scammers aren't just trying to take your money. They can use your information for nefarious purposes as well. So what can they use all of this information to do?
Yeah. So one is, I can get a credit card in your name and make a bunch of charges all in one day. And then all of a sudden you're left with the bill. That might be the thing that now denies you from being able to get that next loan that you really need, or maybe even get a job. If I get enough information about you and I want to take all the money out of your bank account, how would I do that? I can say I forgot the password. And then it's going to ask me some questions. What was the name of your favorite pet? Well, it's probably on your social media page. Mother's maiden name, of course, we all know what a lousy question that is because that's in public records databases. Another job recruitment scam, if you're working remote, you need certain tools and supplies. So we need you to go order these things. We have a contract with this particular company. So we need you to order these supplies and then we'll reimburse you. So you go to the website, you put in your credit card number, and they're off to the races. So there's just all kinds of variations on these, and they're dreaming up new ones every day.
Well, I guess the million-dollar question then is, how can people protect themselves from these scams?
Okay, unplug everything and go live in the hills. Just give up. Resistance is futile. No, that is not the message, but you got to be really careful. It begins with training yourself, understanding what the technology can do and what its limitations are, and remaking how we think about trusting individuals. Other things you can do, make sure you have good passwords, two-factor authentication, and use a technology called passkeys when you see those offered. Ask a few probing questions just to see, if this person says they live in some place that I know is 200 miles from the ocean, I might ask them a question. Boy, what's it like living right there at the beach? Can you hear the waves from your house? And then when they say yes, okay, it's over. You've got a lazy scammer in that case. I would say if you're involved in a romance scam or something like that, demand a video call at minimum. Understand the video call can still be faked, but anybody that starts giving you excuses to why they can't do that, red flags, because that's kind of a deal breaker. All of this stuff gets more and more professional, and that, they keep getting better with theirs. We got to keep getting better with the defense.
Wren, Memorial Day weekend is almost upon us, and we all know what that means.
We remember those who gave their lives for our freedom?
Oh, yeah. But also the unofficial start to summer.
Well, when you're listening to this, Mabel and I will both be on Memorial Day weekend trips. So I will be en route to Washington State to visit my best friend from childhood.
And while Wren is having a nice, relaxing, beautiful time in the Pacific Northwest, I'll be going to 2 weddings back to back. So one is in Michigan, and then the next day I fly to LA for another wedding, which I'm excited for because it's my best friend's wedding.
That'll be so fun. I cannot wait to hear all about it. And it's true, being in the wedding era of our lives, travel is such a focus. So whether you're going to a wedding or multiple weddings or just going on vacation, today we want to give you everything you need to know about summer travel and the recent air traffic woes.
So let's start with the fun stuff. You probably all heard that Airbnb is redesigning their app and expanding from just stays to offering services and experiences.
Yeah, they're rolling out in 260 cities around the world, and you can book services in 10 categories. So tell me which one you're most excited about. Catering, chefs, I guess that's different. Hair, makeup, massage, nails, personal training, photography, prepared meals, and spa treatments. I mean, I think it's smart. Like if we were in a random city and we didn't know anyone, we wanted to get our hair and makeup done, we could book it through Airbnb.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, especially because the services will all be like vetted, so you know what you're booking is going to be safe and high quality.
They're also reimagining Airbnb experiences, which is where you can reserve activities. So They give the examples of shopping trips, food tours, outdoor excursions, cultural events, workout sessions, or even wildlife encounters.
They're also launching Airbnb Originals, which really ups the ante and brings in activities like hanging out with celebrities. So their press release gives examples like booking a beach volleyball game with an Olympian, baking with a famous French chef, or even visiting the Short and Sweet set with Sabrina Carpenter.
Well, something else that just rolled out that I think is insane is that Frontier Airlines is offering an all-you-can-fly summer pass. So for only $399, you can take unlimited flights this summer. The only downside is that it's on Frontier.
Yeah, that's a rough trade-off. But if you're braver than we are, they have an annual pass for $599. And if you're not ready to commit to that, they're offering a limited time $99 pass for the first month, which is actually really good.
That is crazy. Like, that's one flight, but you get unlimited for a month.
And obviously, like, one of the downsides of traveling for some people is having to like compare flight prices and plan an itinerary. Like, it can be so overwhelming. So there's a lot of AI travel hacks that can actually plan your entire trip for you.
Google just released its digital concierge called Gem that remembers your preferences. So like whether you like backpacking or local food or modern art, and then it can give you recommendations on destinations. And since we're all already using Google Flights, they just released a hotel tracker.
We also found a way that you can copy your dream Instagram travel itinerary. So Expedia has this trip matching tool where you can share like a travel Instagram reel with them. Just send it to @Expedia on Instagram. And within a couple minutes, they'll create an entire itinerary based off what you shared with them.
That is so cool. You just also have to have the budget for some of these crazy trips we see on Instagram.
That is true.
Well, it looks like Asia will be the travel hotspot this summer. It makes up more than half of the summer's top 15 destinations, with Tokyo and Osaka at the top of the list.
And it makes sense that Japan is such a popular travel destination. Like, we usually think of it as an expensive country to visit, but the yen is really depreciating. So it hit its weakest level against the US dollar since 1986. So it's definitely become a more affordable travel spot.
But despite all these advancements and exciting destinations, fewer Americans are planning summer trips this year. Only 46% are, which is down from 54% last year. And the biggest reasons that they cite are money because of tariffs and the risk of recession, and safety with all the recent accidents.
So to get all our travel questions answered, we spoke to USA Today travel reporter Zach Wichter.
So Zach, I think a question at the top of a lot of travelers' minds right now is what is going on with all of these air traffic control communication outages? There was just another one yesterday at Newark, and we know last week at Denver.
So it's a great question. And yeah, definitely something I'm hearing a lot. So the first thing I want to emphasize is that flying is still extremely safe. And a lot of the delays and cancellations that we've seen in the wake of these outages is the FAA and airlines responding to make sure that they are flying a number of flights that they can handle safely given the issues that they're having with their equipment. So what's behind these outages, right? The problem with how the FAA is structured and the way that it's funded is essentially that the agency gets funded by Congress on a 5-year cycle. This has made it really hard for the agency to do longer term planning and to fund bigger projects. And as a result of that, they're relying on pretty outdated equipment in a lot of their facilities. And they've also had issues with hiring and training new air traffic controllers. Well, the FAA is relying on equipment that in some cases is decades old. And so it's just past its kind of useful planned for service life. And now they're in this position of having to upgrade this technology. And I suspect that we're going to see outages like this possibly more frequently until these upgrades can happen.
What has been proposed so far to fix this issue? Because we haven't seen too much reporting on that.
Yeah, so it's sort of twofold. We're hearing a proposal out of the Trump administration now, but it certainly isn't the first of its kind. What Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy has proposed is kind of a sweeping overhaul of the FAA's technology infrastructure. There's been a shortage of air traffic controllers for quite a long time. This isn't something also that happened overnight. And the Biden administration did work to kind of address that shortfall. According to Secretary Duffy, about 3,000 air traffic controllers short nationwide. So there's a plan and some financial incentives in place for people to become air traffic controllers and to kind of get that pipeline moving. It's unclear exactly where the funding is coming from right now because it ultimately comes down to Congress who has to decide on the funding.
Ugh, that must be so frustrating for like the airports supposed to fly out out of Newark on Thursday, but I switched my flights to go to JFK. Expect that to continue then for a while.
Yeah, certainly at Newark, I think that we're going to see a reduction in traffic like for quite a while. Essentially what happens is airlines plan their schedules pretty far in advance. What's happening now is because Newark has had to reduce the number of flights, airlines are struggling to operate the flights that they have already sold. But the FAA and airlines are planning on these kind of future reductions. Airlines are going to have, I guess for lack of a better word, a more rational schedule at Newark.
So switching gears a little bit, we saw that real ID requirements like finally went into effect a couple weeks ago. We know they've been talking about that for such a long time. What do we need to know about traveling without one? Because some people, Wren included, do not have a real ID yet. And so
I'm getting around to it.
Yeah. Well, so the good news is when people think of real ID, they think of like the real ID compliant driver's license, which is the one with the star logo or whatever it is in the corner. But that's not the only ID that is actually real ID compliant. So if you have a passport, or like if you're a member of Global Entry and you have the card that they give you, those are also Real ID compliant and can get you through the airport. The TSA does have this sort of alternate procedure for verifying your identity, but it takes more time, so it's going to be harder to get through the checkpoint if you rely on that. And if they're not able to verify your identity through this procedure, then you may be barred from traveling.
That is a good thing to know because this weekend kind of kicks off. It's like the unofficial start of summer. Are we seeing any trends or like summer hotspots?
Yeah, so the good news is we are seeing airfares at relatively low prices, which is great. Part of the reason for that, unfortunately, may be the kind of uncertain economic picture that we're all facing. So people have been a little more cautious about booking trips for this summer, which I think is understandable. That said, according to Hopper, which is an online booking platform, there are still some destinations that are trending, including Santa Fe in the US. And then we're also seeing people still with relatively high demand for international travel. So like one of the top destinations there is Phuket, and then also Japan remains really big on the list.
How do you think the change in US politics and the economy has changed travel this summer?
Yeah, so I mean, we're definitely seeing a little more uncertainty, and we've also heard a lot of international travelers who are choosing to book away from the US who like may live abroad and may have planned a vacation to the US previously, but now are choosing other destinations. One thing that has been interesting with the kind of economic uncertainty is airlines typically release a financial forecast for the full year. A lot of them in the previous quarter pulled their full year guidance because they said that like there's all of this economic instability.
And so we know you've done some reporting on airline updates to first class and even economy cabins. Like any airlines people should book now that look like they've upgraded quite well?
Yeah, so I would say for most travelers, especially if you're flying in economy, there isn't a huge difference between economy on one airline or economy on another. In terms of the more premium cabins, I feel like every airline is kind of either rolling out or planning to have new premium cabins now just because there's kind of new technology and new seats available. So like Lufthansa and its partner airlines are rolling out new business and first class cabins. And one specific innovation that I thought was really cool is they're the first airline to do heated and cooled seats in business and first class like you would get in a car. And I think that that's just like a really nice kind of premium touch.
And just to kind of round out, do you have any best like summer travel tips for people who either like haven't booked their travel yet or are planning trips?
Your best bet is to make sure when you're planning your summer trips to schedule a little bit of buffer time. Like if you're going on a cruise, you don't want to land the morning that you're supposed to be on the ship. Or if you have a wedding or something to go to, you don't necessarily want to be traveling on that day. So I'm definitely anticipating some disruptions to travel this summer. Similarly, early morning flights, which I know can be frustrating to catch, are usually the least likely to be affected by these issues. The way that kind of aviation works is because planes are moving around all day, delays and cancellations tend to get worse later in the day.
My dad will love hearing you say that because he's always been like, it's the plane gets there the night before, so you don't have to worry about like a delay affecting it because it's already there.
Exactly, yeah.
Thanks for tuning in.
Next week, we actually are talking to Hollywood's fastest growing role and intimacy coordinator.
Bye.